All right. Hopefully this thing's working right. My name's Anthony here on God Rules, and I'm with Rob Kowalski. Is that how you say your last name?
That's perfect. Yep.
All right, man. So you're the villain that Mike Winger's been talking about, right?
I think so. Yeah, he definitely came after me.
I saw his thumbnail. It said you were gonna father 100 children or something. Is that true?
There's all kinds of misquotes. He put so many words in my mouth in that video. If you go back and watch it, he's saying Rob said this, but what he's really saying, and he goes way off
He
topic.
knows he knows your mind. He knows what you're
Yeah,
thinking.
apparently he thinks he does. It baffles me because there was so little scripture in that video for someone that claims to be a Bible scholar that's passionate about sharing biblical truth. I'm like, why didn't we go into that? Instead, it was all these false equivalencies and emotional, fallacious arguments. But apparently he's got some feelings about that somewhere, probably from high school. Maybe a jock took the girl he liked or something. I don't know what happened to him, but somebody heard him and it wasn't me.
Well, I don't know about all that. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. I don't know. But I do agree that he did kind of go after you because he said that you had a viral video. I'm like looking around. I'm like, where's the viral video? I saw your response kind of got some views because it was you
Yeah.
responding to him, but I didn't see where you had the super viral video. So I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And then I saw on your channel, you actually did an interview with Heresy Financial, which I
Yeah,
thought was
I had Joe
interesting.
Brown on not long. I've had some big people on my podcast, actually. I had Kevin Sorbo. I've had Mark Driscoll. I've had some
Isn't
big names.
Kevin Sorbo's an actor, right?
Hercules, yeah.
Oh
So
yeah,
I've
yeah,
had,
yeah, yeah. He's an actor.
but I
Okay.
did have a viral video years ago called 10 Reasons Not to Have Sex Before Marriage. Because for the last 24 years, that's how long I've been following Jesus. I was abstinent the majority of them, almost 20 years. I was abstinent. Now I had a,
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that
yes,
video. It's got lots
because
of views.
I was a monogamy only guy too for 23 of those 24 years. I just believed everything that the church told me, and I was, waiting for this unicorn to come along, that I was going to check all the boxes and I was going to get
Unicorn.
married. Yeah, well, you know what I mean? Like I was
Unicorn.
just waiting to fall in love. That's
Oh,
what I
you're
was waiting
waiting
to
for the
fall in
right
love.
woman to fall from the sky into your hands. Right?
I just wanted to fall in love. I wanted to meet a woman that I didn't think there would be a strong possibility that I was going to want to be unfaithful to her, even though
Oh, yeah.
I got to the point that I knew I wouldn't cheat, but I also knew I couldn't settle. So I'm like, and I was stuck, and I was committed to sexual purity. This is the interesting thing. Most people in my position, they just fornicate, right? They say they're waiting for the one, but while they wait for the one, they still sleep around. This
Well,
is what people do.
I was actually thinking about that because I was thinking about the fact that he was going so hard against you. I mean, I'm not into the whole thing of having multiple, women, but or wives, but I can understand where you're coming from biblically, right?
Mhm.
But the thing was, is he came so hard at you, and I'm like, why doesn't he come that way towards the culture where they tell you, be, this, that, or the other? Which I mean, we have the rainbow now, right? We have the
Right.
rainbow everywhere,
In front of the
and
churches.
that's what they promote everywhere. But I mean, a lot of people don't really talk about that, but they're focused. I mean, he seems to be really, really vested into this. And I'm like, really? He seems a little overconfident in his arguments. And the fact is, like, I did research into this a long time ago
Mhm.
myself. And there's a lot of verses you can't just explain away. I
Right.
mean, like, for instance, Caleb, who was one of the men that went in to Israel before they had the land of Israel
Hmm.
under, Joshua
Hmm.
and Moses. Caleb had two wives and he was allowed into the promised land,
Hmm.
but Moses wasn't allowed in because he did one sin.
But
So,
Moses had two wives too.
but Moses did one sin and he struck the rock more than once and he
Right.
wasn't allowed into the promised land. But Caleb, who had two wives, was allowed in. So if it was a sin, why was Caleb allowed into the promised land?
Well,
So
here's a
there's a
bigger
lot of these
question.
things.
Why in 2 Samuel 12 did God tell David through the prophet Nathan, I gave you your wives and I would have
Right.
given you more if you asked?
Right.
God doesn't
Exactly.
give us in. Why is Exodus 22:16 command a man who sleeps with an unbetrothed virgin to marry her? There's no asterisk there that says if he's single. No, regardless if you're single or married, you marry her. It can't be a sin because God would not command us to sin. Okay.
Right.
Why is adultery, biblical adultery, defined by the marital status of the woman? It's not defined by the marital status of the
Well,
man.
here's the thing though. They like if you look at the old Strong's Concordance, it will say that adultery is uh unlawful intercourse between a married woman and someone else, right?
Right.
But if you look at the new Strongs, they
They
changed
changed
the
it.
definition. So that's what I've always noticed is like the farther you go back, the more truth you usually get when it comes to
Yes,
these resources.
exactly.
The old Strongs seem to be, and actually the old Strongs has a few errors in it too, I found. If
Mm.
you go really, because if you go really far back, like for instance, I have this Bible back here, is on this side. Uh, it's next to my YouTube plaque. It's called the Matthew Bible. And I have another one here too. This is actually a modern one, but if you look at these Bibles that are older than the King James, there's one verse that was mistranslated that almost no one seems to know about, and they use this one verse for most theology on this topic, by the way,
Mm,
and it's
mm,
mistranslated.
yeah.
It's Matthew 5:27 to 28. If
Mm,
you look upon a woman with and you desire in your heart, right?
yeah. It's a wife,
You
though.
committed adultery. But yeah, the word is wife if you look at
Yeah.
these older translations. If you look at
Yes.
this one right here,
Yeah.
the Matthew Bible, the Great version, the first English Bible, when William Tyndale, that one
Hmm.
had it translated correctly. But the first one to really kind of promote the false translation was the King James.
Mm. It
And
makes you think why they're doing this, right? Because they want to weigh us down with these heavy burdens that we can't carry. Because it makes
right,
you walk around feeling guilty, like you're just this wretched sinner, when you're really just doing what men do. You see a
but
pretty
that's the
girl, you're like,
point.
yeah, that is the point.
That is the point because their theology, a lot of these Calvinist theology is total depravity, which means you can't stop sinning.
Right.
So to make it so you feel like you can't stop sinning, you have to have this
Attainable.
unattainable
Yeah.
like standard, which is
Yes.
what the Pharisees did too. Because if you remember, the
Exactly.
Pharisees they had an unattainable standard. They had like thousands of rules on the Sabbath, and their whole thing was the Sabbath back then. A lot of it was they'd have all these rules, and they're not even in Scripture. They just made up rules. And he
Right.
said you change the word of God with the traditions of men.
Yeah,
And I believe,
you didn't
yeah,
you disobey the commands of God to uphold the traditions of men. It's exactly what we're doing now. Because look, think about the impossible situation that we put our Christian sisters in. We tell them don't have sex outside of marriage. The marriage rate's the lowest it's ever been in history. 5 out of every 1,000 people are getting married per year. So you expect these women to sit around and just grow
wow.
old, not have babies, or and not have sex? That's what we're saying. Don't have sex. Be single with no covering. It's an impossible situation. And we just go, we'll pray for you. Then we wonder why they run out and marry an unbeliever.
Well, it's interesting because you can see the devil's basically taken over the entire culture.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious that the church has played right into the devil's hands.
Hmm.
And the church doesn't have legitimate answers anymore because if it did, we would be making some headway or some ground, but there's almost no ground being made.
None.
And I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not for, I'm not promoting what, multiple wives or something like
But
that
let me
because I,
just add something right there. It's not about whether you do it. It's about the fact that you can. The simple fact that
yeah,
you
that's my
say,
point. That's
this
my
is my
point.
biblical right as a man. You say, this is my biblical right as a man. It automatically subjugates the woman to the man. That creates polarity in the relationship. She knows it's not egalitarianism, it's not equals because you have the right and she doesn't. And that's the way it should be. But because of this monogamy only thing, you have a 56% divorce rate. 85% of the time that the women are the ones that are falling for the divorce. So even though women say they wouldn't want anything but monogamy, when they get it, they leave. So that's a real problem in the structure.
Well, there's a lot of I think what happened, and this is what because a lot of people would think that it's just a one-dimensional topic, but I think what's going on here is the devil intentionally put the woman above the man so that
Yes.
everything's backwards. The
Yep.
whole the whole system's backwards.
Whole
So
system.
then, and the reason why God put man first, and this is just one theory in my mind. I'm not saying this is exactly the reason, but one theory I think why is because women tend to be more emotional. And you'll notice that some women, they'll say they want something, but actually that's not what they want in the end. Like
Right.
and I'm not saying it's always the case,
100%.
but there are cases where women they'll say they want this
A
from a
nice
man,
guy. I want the nice guy, but then they date the
but then
a-hole.
they actually want the alpha, or
Right.
whatever, right? They don't
Yeah.
want the nice guy. They say they want the nice guy, but then if you
Right.
are the nice guy, they don't want it.
They don't
I've
want you.
noticed that pattern. I'm not saying it's always true, because it probably isn't always true. But I mean, the point is, you can see there's some sort of pattern there that's
Yeah.
being ignored.
Right.
And I mean, there's sort of a nature, a foundation, inner nature that's being sort of subverted with social media, with what we're being told, what we're being taught.
Right.
Because why is it that everything seems to be backwards in our culture, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
Yep.
not saying, and of course they try to make it very scary, like, and I think this started back in like the 1980s and 70s when they would have cult leaders.
Hmm.
on, oh, look at this cult leader. Oh, he's got multiple women.
Right.
Oh, he's a bad guy. So the implication from it is that, okay, if you have multiple, of course, women, that means you're an evil person.
Right.
And I think
Yep.
that was intentional. I think they did that intentionally. So that the only time you ever see anybody that does have more than one, it's because they're an evil person. They're a crazy person.
Well, they're of course they're pushing them to the top. That's what they want you to
But
see. So you have
but the thing is if we look at scripture,
right.
we have all these saints, we have all these not prophets, but saints, kings, just people of notoriety in the Old Testament that had more than one wife. Not all of them,
Not,
but
most of them, though. Most
quite a
of them
few of
did.
them.
Most of the
Yeah,
men who wrote the Bible did. And what the church wants us to believe is that they were these filthy sinners that were just filled with lust. And they were practicing some sin, adultery is what many people say, that was punishable by death. But yet no one was ever punished for it, nor was anyone even condemned for it. And
right.
what's wild is to me is I tweeted this out the other day. If those you read from you quote David's Psalms and Solomon's Proverbs, yet if those men walked into your church with their family, you would kick them out.
Right. I used to say this on YouTube, and I wasn't that exactly, but I would say they would kick Jesus out because
Oh yeah,
Jesus would come in or a prophet would come in, and they would kick him out, like
yeah.
if he was here today. And I wanted to play a clip really quick from Mike Winger that actually fits with what you were just saying.
Hmm.
Uh, Let me play this really quick. I think this is the right one. Yeah, here. No, is that it? Yeah, I think that's it. How do I share it? Here we go. Let me know if it's showing on the screen.
Yep.
I
Let's
don't
see
know
it.
if it will have audio though. Let's hopefully it has audio.
Go ahead and hit the play button. Let me tell you.
All right, before we get into it,
It's a little low. Hold on 1 second. Hit that audio button down below the drop up,
yeah,
and then
audio.
yeah. But next there's that drop up button, and I think it's either what speaker was it on? Select a speaker. Is it the same as system or built-in output?
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, select a speaker.
Try one of those, and then let's see
Probably
if
which one? It's on real. It's on. So you're saying put it on the same as system?
yeah, try that one and see if it changes.
Okay,
Oh no,
ready?
not the select a microphone, but select a speaker. Yeah, there should
Oh,
be same as system and built-in output. I don't know which one is improves it.
so
Uh,
okay. Let me just try this. Let's see if it
go
works.
ahead. It'll be. You know what? Honestly, I think because you're recording, we'll be able to hear it. I hear it, but it's faint. It's a little bit low. But go ahead, hit play.
Jesus follower. My life is completely surrendered to him. Now,
Close that window there, so we're not recording that
which window?
audio window. Oh, mate, never mind. That's on my end. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is it playing though?
Yeah, it is playing. Good.
Okay, let me try this again. Let me
Yep.
pull it back a little bit. Okay, I wanted to play this because I thought it fit. It's going to be a doozy, so stay with me. All right, before we get into it, I need to tell you that I am a committed Christian. I am a Jesus follower. My life is completely surrendered to him. Now, I actually don't doubt this, okay? That he could be a genuine Christian and caught up in this stuff. I absolutely don't doubt that. I don't think that if you've committed polygamy or if you are a polygamist, then therefore you can't be a Christian. I thought, and can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear what they said right there?
Oh yeah, I could hear him.
Because he says committed polygamy. I just thought that was the most hilarious thing that he said there.
Oh, I
Because
didn't catch that.
well, I mean, he said, he said something about if you committed polygamy, like committing, like he's like talking about polygamy like it's a sin, and you commit, like you committed adultery, you committed
Right.
polygamy,
You committed polygamy. Yeah.
and
And
I just thought it
what
was
sin
funny
is
the
it,
way he
Mike?
said
That's
it.
what I asked him. I tweeted him. I said, "What sin is it, and what's the penalty?" Because the Bible doesn't leave. It's not vague. It's very clear about what the punishments are for the infractions. What
Well,
is
I
the
just thought it
sin?
was funny the way he said it. Committed.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody say committed polygamy, like you
Like
committed some
murder.
sort of axe murder or something. Like what is this? I'm not saying that, like I said earlier, I'm not trying to promote it, but the way I look at it this way. I look at it, I think most men would probably be monogamous, but I do think it should be permitted because I think I was looking at the entire system of our culture,
Hmm.
and I think it makes more sense to allow it because if you don't, what do you end up having is Andrew Tate with hundreds of women and they don't get anything out of it. They're never married
They're
to them.
not committing.
Also,
You get rampant
also
fornication.
also, future men are going to be disenfranchised because that woman's already been with many, of course, men. That man feels disenfranchised because he's not the first man to be with her.
Well,
So I think if you had it set up to where Andrew Tate or Tristan Tate we're actually marrying like 10 women and just
Right.
sticking with that instead of going
Yes.
after hundreds of women and
Polluting the dating pool in the process,
exactly.
sleeping
My
with other
point
men.
is
Yeah.
all the other men are stuck with leftovers,
Right. That's
right? And that
exactly
woman
what's
already
happening.
might have a kid, you know
Yep.
what I mean? Or whatever. Or she might be, because she's told you don't need to settle early.
Right.
You don't need to marry early. So they're like 40, 30, 40 years old. They get married and it's already too late. And she's
Well,
already
this is
have a kid,
what
you
you
know?
get to is the average marriage age that men get married is 30 and a half. So they're 30 years old when they're getting married. What are they doing in their 20s? They're sleeping around, of course, right? You want to sow your oats. Now, if polygyny was allowed and not so negatively stigmatized, I would have got married when I was a teenager because what it would do is I know if I don't marry my high school sweetheart, that 35-year-old dude with two wives down the road's been looking at her, and I know he's
Yeah.
going to scoop her up. So I'd have to marry her or I would lose her. And he probably would scoop her up instead of what do we do? Like women in their teens and their early 20s are the most fertile that they ever are in their life. And then what do we give them? Birth control and ship them off to college.
Right. Exactly.
It's pagan. It's
It's
so pagan.
well, there's also the factor. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a woman getting an education. There's nothing wrong with her doing some of the stuff. The problem is our culture is hyper focused on that. And if you go back 50 years, they were getting married in their 20s and women were tended to be more at home. Now it's like women must be in the workforce. When you go to colleges, there's actually more women in college than men now. Men are not actually supporting the family like they used to. It's like the devil's purposely inverted it.
Yep.
So it's out of whack. It doesn't work right. Our
Mm-hmm.
population decreases. Our economy's affected as
Mm-hmm.
well, which no
100%.
one ever thinks about the economy.
Think of
And,
all the single kids that go get incarcerated. I mean,
right,
the fatherless homes. And you have
exactly.
1 in 3 children right now being raised in fatherless homes, and it's expected to double by 2030. This nation's going to collapse if we don't figure this thing out. The other thing I was going to say about
But
if
I'm
you
but I'm
allow it,
saying though that I'm thinking most men would probably still end up being monogamous. But
I
if you have
yeah,
allow whoever's got the means or money or whatever to have more than one, then instead of that, like you said, your former life, you were with 100 plus women, right?
mhm.
So, what about all the men that could have married those women, right?
Right. Well, I would have been married. I would have been married younger, and I would have been stopped polluting the dating pool because what it does, it takes all the fear out of the decision. Right. If I'm 18, I'm like, I'm not going to go. How many 18-year-olds are getting married now? Not many. First off,
No,
they
not
don't
many.
value marriage. There's a very few, a small percentage of men that value marriage. But even if they
Well,
did,
it's more than that. It's because the marriage has been the
yes,
culture's been so
yeah,
polluted that it's very difficult for a man to marry a woman. There's so many factors. You got the money factor,
the family
inflation,
court laws,
the
yeah,
economy, the court laws, just like all these things stacked against you. The devil intentionally set up the culture to uh make you not want to get married at all.
yeah. I mean, monogamy only is like this small confined, box, and you're like trying to force men get in it, and they're like, no, they're not going to get in it. Why should I get in it when I have the entire world that I can walk around? That's what they're doing. They know they can. They don't need to get married to have sex anymore. So they're like, we're not doing it anymore. But instead, they're fornicating. Now, if you said, look, I could have got married when I was 18 years old to my first girlfriend, and I would have thought, you know what, if I decide I want one, and when I'm 25, I can do it. I probably wouldn't have, to be honest, like you said, most men will probably be monogamous, but just knowing that they can,
Well, if you're
that's the
broke, it's going to be kind of hard to
well,
be. Well, I guess technically now you do have women working, so maybe it would work out okay.
I'd
But
have Proverbs 31 women's. You can't tell me not having a few of those women in my house wouldn't be
oh,
beneficial
you
to me.
mean the ones that actually
They
can.
hustled. They were
Well,
hustlers.
there's a verse that says there's a very you probably know which verse I'm talking about. There's a verse that says something about so many women for one man will actually pay her way or something. There's some
Hmm.
verse like that. I can't. My friend.
Isaiah 4:1. It says it basically in that day 7 women will take hold of one man saying, we will provide our own food and clothing. Just give us your last name and take away our reproach. That's a future prophecy. That's coming in the
That
world. So,
sounds it sounds weird, but it actually makes sense kind of because our culture,
yeah,
women can work, but they're at a point we're seeing kind of how the culture is. Men are not wanting to marry. So
yeah.
these women are like begging men to marry them. It sounds weird.
It's
It sounds
crazy.
like a futuristic, weird, dystopia, but I can
Bizarre
actually
world.
see it theoretically happening in some weird, future, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it's
But I
going to
just thought it
happen.
was a weird verse.
It's a future prophecy and it's tied to end times. So you have to ask yourself, what has to happen in the world between now and then for that to happen? Where 7 women are going to take hold of one man. So something's going to have to radically change in the world about the way we view polygyny.
Well, maybe it has something to do with a lot of men are gone and there's no men left, and the women all know how to work. So then they're like, we need a man, but then they also want to have a family. Maybe there's a point where they realize they're just completely sick of it, kind of
Yeah.
like it reaches critical mass, and the women are just like, this is not a lifestyle that works.
I
Uh,
think Mike Winger's helping that facilitate that day coming about is by getting the word out. I do. You think that quote, first they ignore you, then they mock you, then they fight you, then you win. Well, they ignored us before. Now they're mocking. So we've moved past the ignoring part. Now we're into the mocking. Next will be the fighting, and then we'll be victorious.
from what I understand, he's a pastor, right? And actually, I wanted to show something on my screen really quick. Um, he was trying to say that the King of Kings promoted or taught monogamy, right? Which I do think I guess I would say that from the Garden of Eden, you could make some argument, and I'm not saying this is sort of a
How'd that
side.
work out? How'd that work out?
No, I'm just going to make a set. I'm just going to make a little bit of a point and then get to where I
Sure.
think he's wrong, because
Yeah.
I don't think he did exactly promote it. But I mean, you got Adam and Eve, right? And perhaps Eve was more of a perfect woman. I don't know if there's something there that you know what I mean, because
What I
there's
would push back on that and say a couple things. One, look, Adam, the thing that caused the fall was basically what you have under monogamy only, where the woman, basically took the power and started making decisions, and Adam kind of gave up his position as the head of the house, and that caused the fall of man. Now,
well,
look,
you
we
saw
know
you
that
saw the
God.
woman and man kind of vying for power in the relationship.
Well, I think that happens more in monogamy than it does polygyny. Again, it subjugates the woman and creates more polarity. But look, God orchestrated the circumstances for his people, Israel, to come from a man with four wives. He opened and closed wombs. Go back and read the
Right.
passage. It said God did that. So
No,
if
no, I'm
God,
not saying it's a sin, but what I'm saying
right,
is if we were in a perfect world like Eden,
maybe,
maybe you could.
why did God give
And I'm
man
not
the
saying that
ability?
it's required, but I'm just saying maybe if
Maybe,
there is no sin, then there's not this issue with vying for power in a
maybe. But
relationship or something.
then I would say this though: why did God give man the ability to make so many babies a year? Because a woman can only make one baby a year, but man can. He set that whole system up. Why did he give man the ability to make babies till basically we die, where women hit the wall at menopause? Why did he do that? Under monogamy only, it wouldn't make sense. Now, is it possible that with the fall of man, all that changed, our sexual functions? Possible, but I would push back on original intent with those arguments and say, well, why would God have set it up that way? Because we have to look at biology too, because it does leave clues.
Now, he says here, this is actually the video where he's talking about him promoting only monogamy. And he goes over this verse, and this is something I learned because I actually had a divorce a long time ago. What was it? Almost 20, not 20 years ago, but a little bit less than 20 years ago. And I'm married currently, my wife for 15 years now, uh but he's saying here, and the reason why I mentioned the whole divorce thing is because I actually studied very thoroughly the scriptures on marriage and divorce because I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to understand what the Bible really said about it, right? And one of the things I learned is that one of the things that's mistranslated in scripture that people don't understand is the word divorce. The word divorce is not actually correct. When it says divorce here, and I say to you, whosoever divorces his wife except for immorality and marries another commits adultery, right?
Yes.
Now, the problem with that is the word divorce is not accurate. The word is actually send away in the
Send away.
Greek.
Put away. I've
And
heard that.
and the reason why that's important is
Yeah.
because if you go to Deuteronomy 24, this is the foundation of marriage. It talks about how you make a divorce. It says, when a man taketh a wife and married her, and it come to pass she find no favor in her eyes. Can you read that or no?
In his eyes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can read it on the screen. Because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, give it into her hand, send her out of his house. Now, what Jesus is referring to is he keeps quoting the send her out of your house, the send away.
Right.
But you have to have three requirements to get a official correct divorce. You need to write a bill of divorce. No, first you have to find uncleanness, write a divorce, and send her away. So there's three steps: find uncleanness, write a bill of divorce, send her away. Now, what Jesus is doing is he's saying, look, you're just sending her away. You're sending her away without finding uncleanness, without writing a bill of divorce. And
Right.
he's saying, if you send her away without finding uncleanness, you're still married to her. And if you marry another while you're still married to her, you're actually committing adultery against her
Against
because
her.
because
Yes.
she is the actual original wife. And it says in one scripture in the Old Testament, you can't diminish raiment, blah blah blah, or food, clothing, raiment, whatever, if you marry an additional wife. You think I don't remember the verses, but it says that. So if you're actually diminishing and rejecting the first wife unfairly, you haven't really divorced,
Yeah,
according to Scripture.
I don't know that passage well enough to break it down, but I will say this: that when they say Jesus taught monogamy, the second coming, Jesus compares his second coming, to a polygynous wedding, the parable
Right,
of the
right,
ten
right,
virgins. I
right.
mean, it's the church is the perfect picture of
You're talking
polygyny.
about the bride,
The
the
parable of the ten virgins, five
ten
foolish and
virgins, right,
five wise. He took the
right,
five wise virgins into the marriage chamber.
right,
The actual word for that, I read the great book by Glenn Braunstein, who broke it all down. The marriage chamber was just where the bride and grooms went, and that was where they went to consummate the marriage, where they would
right.
bring out the sheet and show that there was blood on it.
I
Those
believe
those
I believe it was like you're saying. I do believe that was 10 wives that were supposed to be 10 wives.
wives,
And it'd be
what?
I do agree with you. I think that's what the parable's referring to. And I think it also is representing maybe different pieces of the church, like each one's a different bride of the church, sort of symbolically, because the church is a bride, right?
Right, yeah.
And there's different types of churches, different types of groups
Seven
out
different
there.
churches in Revelation. Well, but you're a bride of Christ. I'm a bride of Christ. It's a perfect picture of a polygynous
Right.
wedding. And he compares it to a polygynous wedding. And would Jesus have compared himself to something that was evil or filthy or sinful?
Right.
Would he tell a parable with a pedophile as the main character representing him, or a murderer? No, of course not. So there's nothing wrong with polygyny. And we need to stop telling people that because it's creating a lot of problems.
Well, and like I was saying with this verse, my point is that it actually doesn't say divorce. What it's saying is send away incorrectly divorcing. So, and I say unto you, whosoever incorrectly divorces his wife, and it says except for immorality, which was the uncleanness. You remember the first step was
Yeah.
uncleanness.
Hmm.
Find uncleanness, give a bill of divorcement, send away. So the unclean, it says except for immorality, except for uncleanness, and marries another, you commit it. So if you get a divorce properly and marry another, it's not adultery, is what he's saying. If you incorrectly divorce and marry another, that is adultery. And now he's using this as an argument against polygyny. And my point is that he doesn't understand what it's saying in the ancient languages.
Yeah. If anything, it's an argument against serial monogamy, right?
Well,
Because
it's that too. I mean,
because if
technically,
you
if
think
you
about,
just
isn't
look at it
this
wrong.
exactly what almost the majority of church members are doing? If you really understood scripture and you walked in church, the church is full of adulterers
Well,
because you got
it's
all these
interesting
people.
you mentioned that. It's interesting because that was exactly what the King of Kings was referring to is marrying or divorcing, without really a real legitimate reason. So if you don't have a legitimate reason for a divorce and you just get a divorce, you're still married in his eyes.
Right.
So it's like you're saying it. This is actually speaking against that as well. It's
Yeah.
speaking against what is it called? There's the type of divorce they allow today. I forgot what it is. No fault.
No
No fault.
fault. Yeah.
So the no fault divorce is actually violation of the actual design of the covenant, because that's what he was speaking against. He was basically speaking against no fault divorce. He was
Right.
saying, you can't just divorce for whatever reason.
Right.
And,
Right.
and back then they were allowing it. The Pharisees were saying, you could find some really silly, ridiculous reason. She spoke back against me. All you had to have is a little itty bitty, you know,
Right.
strain at a gnat type instead, and then swallow a camel by breaking the covenant, right?
Exactly.
So strain at a gnat, swallow a camel. So the point is to understand the ancient languages, and a lot of the reasons why we have denominations today and have all these derision and division and fighting is because no one looks at the ancient languages, no
Hmm.
one thoroughly studies it. This guy's a pastor, Mike
And
Winger.
he's
So
getting it wrong, and he's still getting it wrong.
this is common though.
Yeah.
This is what I've noticed is it's very common because a lot of pastors are not equipped to really study the ancient languages. And like I was saying, getting back to that verse that everyone mistranslates, which of course a lot of people push back on this, but there's a verse. Oh, this is the wrong document. I got it around here. Is it here? No. Okay. Okay. So let me pull it up really quick. I have to go over to it real quick.
Sure. Take
Uh,
your time.
oh, whoops. And I can't type with this mic in front of me very easily. Okay. Give me a second here. So go to my website, go to articles, go to Matthew 5:20. Here we go. So I have this verse here. You've heard that it said of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, whosoever looketh on a woman hath already committed adultery, right? In his
Yeah.
heart. So the thing is that this word is wife. We were already talking about that, right? We were
Yep.
already mentioned about the word wife. Now, if you look at the actual Greek, it says guneka. The word gun means woman. Guneka is almost always translated wife throughout scripture, like 99% of the time. Only in like two verses out of like 50 is it translated woman. which it shouldn't be because it literally means wife.
Right.
So this is what I find really interesting is if you Jesus said, beware of the scribes and Pharisees. The scribes translate scripture. So you
Right.
have all these translations, and I think that King James is a pretty good translation. There are a couple errors in it here and there, but it's
Mhm.
a lot better than some of the modern ones.
Right.
Okay. But the fact is, even it had errors in it. And if you
Yeah.
go back farther to the very first translation in English, it was actually more accurate, the Tyndale. But the fact is, uh, no one looks at the ancient languages. They don't consider if the scribes are changing something.
Right.
And this word is actually wife. And it even, I mean, there's so many, there's actually 10 ways I could prove this, but you even have an ancient uh, father in the church named Theolophus of Antioch from AD 180 who spoke a classic or ancient Greek, saying he even used King Solomon as a good example of how to follow this verse. If you could even imagine that. So
Yeah.
if you look at a woman and think something about her, it's a sin according to modern day teaching, right?
Yeah, to have desire for a woman, which look, every man that's
But it
watching
says
this,
King Solomon was a
yeah,
good example of how not to do that, which doesn't make any sense because he had hundreds of wives. Okay,
right,
so it makes no sense. Why would this ancient scholar use King Solomon as a good example of how not to do this?
right,
Unless it's a wife. If it's a wife, it makes sense then. So it
right.
had to mean there's that. And then you also have, if you compare the Greek Septuagint, which is the OT in Greek, guneka, guneka, both in Matthew and this is Exodus 20. You know what this is? The 10th commandment. Do not covet thy neighbor's wife. So he's actually paraphrasing the 10th commandment. Do not
Right.
covet thy neighbor's wife. And they've changed the verse to mean you think any thought ever you've done
Yeah.
something. That's so getting on to some other stuff. I just wanted to kind of go over
No,
that.
that's great. That's great. Again, they try to. That's what the enemy wants to do. He wants to distort everything and weigh us down with these heavy burdens that we can't carry. No man can be successful at that. Every man watching this, he's married. Even if you waited to have sex until you're married, you desired her before you married her. So does that mean you're an adulterer?
Right. Right.
Like that's
Well,
sin because I
that
desired
by the
her.
way, that word, lust,
Covet.
that word is the word desire, which means any desire. It doesn't mean just
Oh,
sex or anything like it. It's any desire.
I thought so. I did a whole podcast episode about that verse, about the passage, and he told me that it meant like it basically it was like a strongly lust after. It wasn't even
No,
like
no, no,
I
no.
want a woman like her. It's like I want her. Like
No, no, no.
when
It
you look at
means
another
any
man's wife
desire.
and you like I want her, even if you're not going after, that's he said that's adultery in your heart.
No, no. The Greek word is used in other passages.
Hmm.
1 Timothy 3:16, he that desires the office of a bishop desires a good work. Same word.
Hmm.
He didn't lust after the office of a bishop.
Right, right.
He desired it. So
Yeah,
it's the same exact word. Obviously, it's referring to any type of desire.
right.
And of course, if it was you can't desire a woman in any way, shape, or form, you have sinned, adultery, that sounds insane.
Yeah.
So
I'm
that
pretty
actually
sure it was the
fits.
same word Jesus used when he said, I strongly desire to have this meal with you at the Last Supper.
Well, there's more than one desire word, but it could be the same word. I'm not
Right.
sure.
But yeah,
Because
it
actually,
just
that
supports your point.
he that desires the office of bishop desires a good work. That those two desire words in that sentence are actually two different Greek words, but one of them is actually the same as that passage.
Huh.
So there's actually more than one desire term. But you're right. I mean, it's kind of funny. And actually, the reason why I think this happened is something that happened in church history in the Vatican. Okay, and it's actually prophesied in First Timothy 4. In the latter times, I could show this on the screen, but this actually, the reason why we have this doctrine, it comes from the Latin school of theology or the North African school of theology, which is where St. Augustine came from.
Hmm.
And for some reason, Protestants and Catholics really focus on St. Augustine. They consider him the father of theology for both churches. And there's actually tons of other teachers from his time frame. St. Augustine was not he was big, but he wasn't the biggest guy in his time. And there's actually many other people, but they've all sort of narrowed in on this one guy in his teaching. And it actually prophesies this in First Timothy 4. Let me show you this really quick on my screen. Yeah, here we go. This is the right one, pretty sure. So it says here in First Timothy 4, if you can see that on the
Yeah.
screen,
Yep.
it says, now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter time some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to doctrines of devils. Actually, this is not fitting the screen right, is it?
Yeah.
Hit
No,
refresh.
but
Oh,
I
here we
think
go.
it
Here we
looks
go. I got
awesome.
it. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter time some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits, doctrines of the devil, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience here with a hot iron, forbidding to marry. You know, priests can't marry now.
Well,
Abstain from meats, meatless Fridays, which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. Now let me explain. In 1120, 1054 AD, the Catholic and Orthodox Church split. And then that allowed the Catholic Church to do whatever it wanted. Because before that, they had a balance of powers. They had bishops that all kept each other in check. So, like, if a bishop got out of line, the other three bishops would kick him out, right? That's how it worked.
mm-hmm.
That was in the Orthodox Church. Then the Pope said, look, I'm in charge. He's the Bishop of Rome. I'm in charge. I'm separating from you guys. They had a little dispute between the Orthodox and the Catholics. The Catholics separated. Now they're ruled by one Pope, one bishop. No one can tell him he's wrong, right? He goes in 1120 AD, he nullifies all priest marriages. So before that, priests could marry. And
Right.
actually, some priests had more than one wife. That
Yeah.
actually was the case. Even like in 1000 AD, there was priests with more than one wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what was that motivation behind that too? Why they stopped them from being married, right?
Well, there's more than one reason, but what's the one you're gonna say?
Well, it was the land. They were leaving
Yeah.
their estates to their kids, and the church said, "No, we want that."
Yeah,
Because
that's
now
what
when
it
the
was.
priest died, they get everything. The church gets it. So it was
Right.
all motivated by money. But forbidding people to marry.
I think
Yeah,
it's more than that too, though.
I,
I think it's also the devil was involved, and I think he wanted to make
oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
sex something. He wanted to control this resource. And he wanted to put his name on it. So if you want this sex, you have to come to the devil.
Right.
So
Yep.
if you go to church, you're not going to get any. But if you
Yeah.
want it, you're going to have to come over here where the devil
Yeah.
is.
Right. So forbidding people to marry, though, I would challenge that's what the monogamy only people are doing, because you got 2 women to every man in the church right now in the United States. So
Yeah.
half of our women are not able to find a husband because they're not able to marry a godly man who's already married. When the Bible's very clear about the fact that God's fine with it.
Well, my point is that our theology comes through St. Augustine, which is actually the same thing as this, which is the idea that they basically, if you look at some of these ancient writings from this North African Latin school of theology, it was basically like sex is a sin. Like it's
Right.
just bad. If you
Yeah.
do it in the daylight, it's a sin.
Yeah.
They had all these weird rules. If you do it the night before you make a sermon the next day, it's a sin. They had
Right.
all these weird rules like this. Jerome was very fanatic about this, Saint Jerome. And there's this book where he's arguing with the guy. I can't remember the guy's name, but like the guy's just like, hey, marriage is good. There's nothing wrong with it. Women are equal if they're virgins or not. And he's like, no, you're wrong. Virgins are 40 times more holy than married women. Sex is evil. And this is basically how he was arguing. This is St. Jerome. They came from this theology and it led to forbidding to marry.
Yeah.
So the theology that's in the Protestant church is the same theology. It's the same like anti, sex theology that led into this mindset. And that's why you have, and there's even in the early church, they didn't even look at 2 or 3 wives as polygyny. They looked at it as, I forgot what they called it, bigamy, trigamy, but they only called it polygyny when you went past 3. That
Huh.
was like the early church, very
Yeah.
early.
Right.
Today, like anything past 1 is obviously polygyny today.
Right. Yeah.
So all this stuff is like, if you look at church history, which of course a lot of Protestant churches will not look at, and if you go talk to particularly Calvinistic, they don't look, they refuse to look at the early church. They just
Yeah.
say, oh, they're a bunch of heretics. They got off track really quick. That's basically their argument.
Right.
Really ridiculous. I mean, I talked to James White. You know James White? Have you heard of him?
No.
He's like one of the main apologists, sort of in the Calvinistic
Hmm.
realm.
Hmm.
You go look him up online. He's pretty big. But I called his ministry, Alpha and Omega Ministry, and I
Yeah.
talked to the president of it. And I'm like, well, why don't, it was like a long time ago. It was like 15 years ago. And I'm like, why don't you guys look into the early church? He's like, oh, those guys are all off track early on. It doesn't matter.
It's like a game of telephone, right? And you think you're a hundredth down the line, and you think you heard better than the first guy, right?
Right.
That's what it's like. I mean, we we
Yeah.
we read scripture like we spoke with God face to face. Thousands of years later, oh, we know what one flesh meant better than Moses. I mean, Moses wrote it and had 2 wives, but it,
Yeah.
it meant monogamy, and he just didn't understand it. Come
So
on.
Moses had 2 wives or 4 wives?
He had, well, at least 2, because if you remember, he was married to the whatever when he was in the wilderness, and then when he takes the Jews out, in the Exodus, takes them out of Egypt, Miriam criticizes him for marrying the Ethiopian. So
Oh,
he
okay. Yeah. That's
so
just
he
second
married
story.
a black woman, and Miriam got leprosy because she spoke against it. So
Right.
like yeah, people try to say, some every time polygyny was practiced, something bad happened. That's people that haven't studied. If you look,
That's he said that. He said that. Mike
what
Winger,
happened to Moses? Nothing. Joash, Josiah, all these people, had more than one wife. Nothing
Caleb.
bad happened. Gideon had a ton of, had several wives.
Well, King
Now,
David was fine until he actually stole another
David
man's
did
wife.
right and everything. The Bible says he did right and everything except with Uriah the Hittite. He did everything that the Lord commanded except with Uriah, and he had 18 wives. So what is it? The Bible never called it sin.
Some might debate that it was 7 to 18 or something, but it
Well,
doesn't
I don't
matter.
know the number,
If it
but
was seven, it's still a lot. It's
still
more
a
than.
lot, right? Yeah,
But my point is like I'm actually happy being monogamous, mainly
yeah,
because the culture is insane. Like
yeah.
I actually I understand why men don't want to get married now because this culture is really bad. The culture, I mean, you got to admit this culture is terrible. And I think it's the devil stacking the deck against us, making it so you don't want to get married. And if you
Hmm.
want sex, you got to come to him.
Right. Make
That's
it
it.
dirty.
And he did this in the Old Testament too. If you notice, he put sex in the temple, right? You want to have some fun, you got to go to the temple and worship false gods.
Prostitutes, yeah. Yep.
So the devil's been doing the same strategy, just a little bit different for thousands of years.
Yeah,
He's been doing
and to
the
be
same
honest, that's what this is. If you look at the religious establishment, they believe this monogamy only crap. They're feeding it to people, and they're persecuting the people that talk about polygyny. It's the same thing. It's history repeating itself. Jesus always sends prophets,
Well, you're not
messengers.
trying to tell Mike Winger to get married to multiple women, are you?
Well, no, I'm not saying anybody
You can
should,
marry one woman, right? You're
but to
okay.
tell people they can't and it's a sin when the Bible never does,
You're not
that's
forcing him. You're not going to force him to marry more than one wife, are you?
I would almost say it's a sin for a godly man not to cover more than one woman, given the state of the circumstances that we're in right now, with so many women that are looking for men. Two women to every man in the church. That's a statistic. That's a fact. That's a number, and they don't
Well,
lie.
okay, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, you're not saying you're required, but you're just
I'm not
saying it's
saying
a
you're
good idea.
required, but you definitely
Good idea.
should. It shouldn't be called sin. And I would challenge a man that if he has the ability to cover more than one, that he should, given the way things are. Doesn't mean that he has to. Now, but this is what the church. Let's say God told you to marry the widow across the street, and you would, literally, you couldn't do it. You'd be breaking the law, number one, but also
Well, it's
you'd
against
probably
the
be
law.
kicked out. You'd be kicked out of your church and
Is it
all
against
kinds.
the law? It is against the law, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. If it's against the law to have more than one government issued marriage license, which I would never tell anyone to do.
Well, isn't it interesting? I thought the government was all about promoting evil. So why aren't they okay with polygyny?
That's a great question. Think about it. They're okay with
And
two
they're
men getting
promoting everything
married.
else. I
You
mean,
can look, you can impregnate, you can sleep with as many women as you want outside of
yeah,
wedlock, get them all
exactly.
pregnant, kill the babies, marry another man, chop your wiener off. You can do all that legally, no problem. But if you want to marry more than one woman and commit to her, protect and provide for her, it's illegal. That's what you should be asking now if you're on the right side of this, because that is a real clear sign that this is of God, and this is why people hate it.
Well, but Mike Winger thinks you're crazy though, dude.
Yeah.
So
Well, fortunately, he's not the ultimate authority. The Bible is.
no, I mean, it's not like he does have some good videos. Like I think he has some legitimate stuff, but here and there he says things that just really kind of rub me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And this was one of them that kind of got under my skin because I knew he wasn't. I've already studied this, and it's pretty obvious to me that at least, I mean, you can't. I mean, if you deny that the Old Testament allowed it, and you say it's a sin in the Old Testament, you're clearly not studying Scripture, right? At
Right.
least in my mind. But if you're saying in the New Testament it's been removed, okay, you can make a little bit of an argument, but once you get to the ancient languages, it's pretty hard to make that argument.
Right.
So I look at it kind of like, where's the weight at, right?
Mhm.
And I've noticed a lot of people will try, well, it was a sin in the Old Testament. I mean, if it was a sin in the Old Testament, you have a lot of problems because God's promoting sin.
Right.
And so that's why I don't really respect people that say it was a sin in the Old Testament. If they say it's a sin in the New Testament, I can respect them because at least that makes a little bit more sense, right?
Yeah.
But again, like I said, if you look at the ancient languages, if you get past the English translations, it's not as easy or clear cut as you think. It actually, I would say it's not a sin based on the New Testament in the ancient languages.
Yeah, no, he loses all credibility. I mean, to me, I didn't watch his stuff before that, but just the way he argued that point, like you said, to try to argue that it was a sin in the Bible when you have so many problems to try to make that case, there's so many holes in that argument. That's like a piece of Swiss cheese,
Well,
but yet he's trying
one
to
of them
make
they
it.
use is they say that multiplying wives, which was the sin of
It
King
says first
Solomon.
it says kings though. It doesn't say the average person. And it also says don't multiply horses and gold in the same verse. So you're telling me that
Right,
a king that has two horses is sinning? What king
right, right,
doesn't
right.
have two horses? What king doesn't have two pieces of gold? It meant hoard. The word meant
Right, it
hoard.
meant horde,
It
right?
was a
Exactly.
hard issue,
Yeah.
right? So
Well, we know that here's the thing, a Song of Solomon, that was King Solomon's 141st wife based on the scriptures. And obviously God didn't have a problem with 141 wives.
Well, God chose the most famous
He
polygynous
did
man
have
in the
800
history.
though, so maybe he sinned after that. I don't know,
Right.
but yeah, he might
Well, he
have.
definitely hoarded, but I don't think his sin was marrying multiples. It was marrying pagan wives, strange wives, is what the Bible says, and that's what led his heart away from the Lord. No, God never criticized him for
Yeah, and
marrying.
that's actually what led him to his downfall because
Right,
he sacrificed to some false god. There's I forgot where it is. There's some book that talks about this about Solomon, and
but God, go ahead. But
no, but
God,
he,
this is
so that
what's
was his thing,
interesting. God chose the most famous polygynous man in history to write his book on love. Wouldn't
I
he
know,
have chosen a monogamist if polygyny was sin?
right? Yes,
He chose a polygynous man to write his book on
and it was a white,
romantic
and it
love.
was a white dude with a black chick, probably. I mean,
Was it?
because Shulamite was dark skinned, or
Okay,
maybe she
yeah.
was Arabic. Who
Well,
knows?
he
She
had
might have been
jungle
a dark
fever.
Arabic. She might have been Indian. Who knows? I mean, I could be.
Solomon had jungle fever then.
Yeah, I mean, so Moses did too. I mean, he had more than one wife,
Right.
and one of them was Ethiopian, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
apparently, God doesn't have a problem with that.
Nope.
If he did, Moses would have been in trouble, and King Solomon too. But
Yeah.
when it had Song of Solomon written the way, so it's just kind of funny looking at all this stuff. But I mean, I've looked at his other videos, and I mean, like he was right to kind of go after Benny Hinn because Benny Hinn has some issues for sure. But he was referencing Justin Peters, who's a cessationist. You know what a cessationist is, right?
No, I don't. What
It
is that?
means they don't believe in any miracles.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So I think it's kind of weird for him to go after a prosperity. It seems very convenient
Right.
because it's like he's like his safe ground is these cessationists like John MacArthur. While he picks on the prosperity, it's like easy pickings. It's like you can easily pick on these guys.
That's why he chose me, to be honest.
You're an
I'm the
easy,
easy
that
target.
might be it. Maybe he likes easy pickings. He likes
Well, I'm wearing a wife beater in the video, and I, in some of my videos I cuss and I'm kind of rough around the edges. He's not going to go after
oh,
like Pete
yeah,
Rambo or,
swearing's a sin. Thou shalt not swear, right? I remember that.
well, these words didn't even exist when the Bible was written. So who decided?
Thou shalt not swear. I mean, even though
Right.
God said piss us against the wall and said the word crap and stuff in the Old Testament, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're not
Well,
supposed to say bad words.
Paul, I believe that the word when he says I consider all things rubbish is what we translated it to, but I was told it was like dog s
Yeah,
dog
there's some
shit.
words. Yeah, if you look at the ancient languages, there's some colorful words that have been sort of cleaned up in the English translation to that make you think it wasn't bad, like
Yeah.
or
Well,
something.
isn't it more about the intention of the word? Because I have a hard time believing that some man after the Bible was written decided that if we put these four letters in this particular order that it's a sin. That just sounds ridiculous to me. If I stub my toe and I say shit out loud, does that mean anything? Now, if I call you a dum dum, like that would be a lot worse in my opinion because I'm actually it means
Unless I
something.
am really dumb, I don't know. That might be.
Well, I think Mike Winger's a dum dum.
I don't think he's dumb. I think he's just, he's in a safe place with his teaching.
He's
It's
got a
easy.
lot of
It's
women
very easy
followers.
to.
I guarantee there's a lot of women on his channel, and he's appealing to them.
Well, he's going after easy pickings, like Benny Hinn and these guys, and he takes very safe stances on things.
Mhm.
So
Right.
he's okay in the church. He can be invited to churches and stuff. And
Yeah, exactly.
I've talked about these controversial topics even back 10, 15 years ago. People thought I was crazy. I just did it for fun. I was doing it for fun because I didn't care. I'm not going to churches. I'm not touring. I'm not trying to sell stuff. I'm not in the
Right.
church scene or whatever. But I'm on YouTube. I can say
Yeah.
whatever I want, right? So,
Right.
but I'm not even polygynist. But I don't. I think technically it's not a sin. I think most people wouldn't be it. I think it's okay. I think it should be permitted because, like I told you, Tristan Tate, he brags about being with hundreds and hundreds of women, sometimes five a day. I mean,
Yeah.
that's insane. And
And think of
all those women
those
could
are
have married
another
a
man's
the
future
guy.
wives.
Yeah, it could have been another man's future wife, and he's just tainted
Yeah.
thousands of women, and
100%.
he claims to be a Christian too.
Imprinting his DNA on them, literally.
Right.
It's like stepping in a wet cement. That's what we're doing to these women,
But you don't
leaving an
see him
impression
coming
on them.
after Tristan Tate for doing all this stuff. He comes after
No.
you, which
Right,
is
right.
funny because I think Tristan Tate has a lot of influence, and he's telling men that this is okay. Five girls a day, don't matter,
Well,
you know?
I was on a 2 hour phone call with Justin Waller
So
yesterday.
if you were preaching your old stuff, it'd be okay. You wouldn't have came after
Right. Exactly. Nobody would care. Now, if
you. Yeah.
I'd probably celebrate it. But no, who Justin Waller is? He's like Tate's right hand man.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of
Jack
it.
dude with like blondish red hair.
Let me look
Anyway,
him up.
yeah,
I've
check him out. But
heard the name.
he actually I would actually ask everybody watching this. He's searching for God. and he doesn't know what he believes about
Oh
Jesus.
yeah.
And
Okay.
so
That's right.
say a prayer for his salvation, if you would, please. But he's very interested in polygyny, right? He's out doing the same thing that the Tates are doing with women. But he sees the benefit in committing to them, and he doesn't know where he stands with Jesus. But I sent him the Case for Christ on Audible, and told him I pray for him. But if we can get a couple men like that, I really believe that this monogamy only doctrine really castrated Christianity, because it's made us like a feminized version. Like if you look at Abraham, he was a gangster. I mean, what he went out, he had an army of 300 men and went out and killed all those people. Like these guys were warriors, and but now Christianity is viewed as like Ned Flanders. That's our most the character they
It's worse
attribute
than that, but
most
yeah,
to.
I agree. It's been like that for many years. That's what my complaint was when I first got on YouTube, was that the church seemed very feminized.
Yeah,
The
100%.
men,
And that's what the devil
yeah.
wanted.
It felt like Mr. Rogers, like James Dobson, kind of really soft voice, and
Exactly.
he was saying that I thought it was really bizarre some of the things he said here and there. Um, he was very much against polygyny. I know that very
Mr.
much.
Rogers,
No, not him. James,
Dobson.
yeah,
Oh yeah, I'm sure he is. Yeah,
very
focus on the
much.
family.
And
Yeah.
although he's about focus on the family, right? It's kind of interesting.
Think
And
of
the
how big your
entire
family could be with
point
polygyny.
and the entire point is if you look at it from a macrocosm, the devil is trying, and the way I look at it is like you have sort of a heritage and history from the Middle Ages, and this might sound strange, but you had Christian kingdoms and peoples, and they were all from Europe mostly. Not all, but you had some from Asia and Russia too, and all that. But a lot of these people were descendants of, and it seems like the only people that are being sort of uh, influence to not have marriage or family or any children are those that were from that type of kingdom. If
Yeah.
you have an Arabic background or anything else, they're very much promoted to have children. So it's almost like the devil wants to have less believers,
Yes.
less kids, less believers, and make it so it's very much not interesting to people to want to go
Yes.
into either.
Yeah, the biological family is our greatest weapon to populate heaven and really take dominion in the world, because I think the number
That's
is
dominionism.
well,
You ever heard of that?
children are 80% more likely to pick up the worship patterns of their fathers. So
I
if you
just wanted to mention that because a lot of these churches are anti-dominionism as well, which I think is ridiculous because we want God's dominion on earth,
I
don't we?
just mean like, yeah, I just mean
No, no, no. But
like,
you mean we want
yeah,
to have good things?
yeah,
No,
abundant
no, we
life.
should just give it all up because we're going to get out of here. We're going to get zapped
Right.
out of here.
Yeah.
We're just all going to hell. We don't need to be here anymore. Don't
So
even try. Just give up. Give
yeah.
up. Stop
But so,
trying.
yeah, think if you had these, a godly man with, three or four wives and a rack of children, leading them all to the Lord,
Exactly. Yeah.
that would be great for the kingdom. But what the devil did was he took away our two greatest force multipliers, because polygyny, we're supposed to be allowed to do it, and we should reject homosexuality as Christians. And he flipped it and he gave it to the Muslims. So the Muslims believe in polygyny and
Right.
they reject homosexuals, and they're multiplying so much faster than us because of it. We got it back where we got rainbow flags outside of our churches, and then we throw the polygynists out. It's
Right.
like
Right. Exactly.
completely upside down.
And in 60 Minutes is not going to care if some Arab guy has three wives. But if
Right. They don't
you
care.
do,
Right.
you're going to be like featured. Look at this crazy guy.
Exactly.
Children. And
Right.
and of course that's what they do. As soon as something like this gets bigger, and I mean it's so pathetic at this point that they did this with Andrew Tate of all people.
Yep.
Andrew
Yep.
Tate is not what I would call the best way going forward, right? But they were trying to cancel him just because
Yeah.
he was telling men to have, be men. It's
Right.
literally the only message that he has pretty much right almost
Right.
is men be men,
Yep.
right? That's about it. And they're trying
Yeah.
to cancel him over that. So that's how
Well,
pathetic things are now.
well,
They're
he
so
could.
pathetic that
Yeah.
they don't even want you to be a man.
Yeah. No, it's true. They want you to get a sex change, because then you're a lifelong customer of the pharmaceutical company that you're worth hundreds
Oh
of
yeah,
thousands
there
of
you go.
dollars to them over the course of your life. But no, I love Tate.
You make them
And
lots of money.
Tate's doing a lot. He says a lot of wrong things and gives bad advice, but he does a
Yeah,
lot of does a lot of good things. And if he ever converted to Christianity, truly converted, I mean, the damage that he could do to the enemy would be vast. So I pray that
yeah.
that he sees the truth at some point, because we need to rebrand Christianity. It needs
Of course. Yeah.
it needs a whole makeover, because
Well,
what
it's not a
we have
rebrand.
now
We need
isn't
to bring it
working.
back to what it was
What it
because
was,
they
yes,
completely rebranded it into this ridiculous thing it is today.
yes, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree with you on that, man. But I think how long have we been talking? I don't even know how long we've been talking now.
Let's see here. I don't know. It doesn't tell us on the timer.
Oh,
Probably
okay.
40 minutes or so.
I mean, is there anything else you wanted to say in response to Mike Winger? Because I felt like it was kind of like he was just picking on an easy target a little bit because you're not like super huge.
Right.
You had a couple big videos in the past, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's kind of hard to get viral every time you turn around, right? So,
Yeah, it
you
is.
know, and I feel like he was like pretending like you're like viral on this topic. There must be something there though. There must be
Yeah.
something there. Is it because did you have something that was kind of going bigger, or is it because just the overall movement's getting
Yeah,
bigger?
so I think I'm creating more content around this topic than anybody in the world right now between all my channels. I mean, I post multiple times a day, and I have, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook,
They
X,
want to
all.
squash it before it gets anywhere,
Right,
you
that's
know?
what it is. They're trying to do damage control, right? They're trying to make fun of me and mock me because they're hoping to put out this little fire that we've started. And if they can like shame me and mock me hard enough, maybe I'll go away and maybe people will forget what they heard me say and not look it up. That's what they're trying to do.
I'm just saying it should be permitted. And I think
Yeah.
that it would help. I mean, if Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate were polygynist and not just going around to every woman, I think there'd be a lot more women for other men, and other men would thank me for it. You know what I mean?
100%.
And so I think it's legitimate. I think it's much better than no marriage and everybody just goes around and doing stuff with everybody.
100%.
Yeah, so I don't know why he would not see that as true. Why would you see what's going on in the culture as being better? So I mean, worst case, Mike Winger, even if he doesn't agree with us scripturally, he should at least realize there's a lesser of two evils, right?
Right.
Which one's a better evil,
Yeah,
rainbows or polygyny?
exactly. We've tried monogamy only. Look,
Or just go
look
around to
around.
any woman and do whatever you want anytime you want, you know?
The thing
So,
is he offered no solutions. He looked at my 5 reasons and he just made fun of them and tried to say why they wouldn't work, but he offered no solutions. If you notice,
well,
what are the
that's the problem, man. There's no solutions and everything stays the same
right?
and it gets
Exactly.
worse. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned the one verse they use in Matthew 19:19, which is basically a mistranslation because the word divorce means send away, which means
Mhm.
it's one of the three steps of a divorce. It's an incorrect divorce. So if you incorrectly divorce a woman and marry another one, you're cheating against the first one. But if you don't divorce her and you marry another one, it's not a sin. And if you divorce her properly and marry another one, it's not a sin. So there's those factors, I
So let
think.
me ask you this. Let's say a woman wants to be my second wife. She was married once before. She divorced for maybe she was unfaithful, let's just say, or just no good reason. But she got the divorce papers, signed by the man. Is she free game for a
Well, I
Christian
mean,
man to marry?
technically, I mean, this sounds like a bad reason, but I mean, if he cheated on her, then for sure, yeah. If she has a
Well, that he
divorce,
did, but that's not biblical. If he cheated, there's nothing in the Bible that talks about a man cheating. A
well,
man
no, no,
can
no,
go out
no.
and
Okay, so what I mean is, what I'm saying is, if the marriage contract said they're going to be faithful to each other,
okay, that's
that's in
different.
the
That
marriage contract
yeah,
itself.
forsaking all others. If he made that vow, he broke his
Yeah,
vow. I
right,
gotcha.
right. That's in a lot of vows now.
Okay, that's fair.
I actually didn't do that. I technically kept that out of mine, but even though I don't want to marry another one, but the fact is, like,
Smart
so.
man.
But I see what you're saying. But I mean, let's say she cheated, and that's not a good thing, obviously.
No,
And
obviously it's not a good thing, but
recommend probably
let's
not
say she
marrying
did it.
her.
Let's say
My thoughts would be it might not be a
yeah.
sin, but it might not be a good idea to marry because she might do it to you.
Well, let's just say she wasn't I'm just making a hypothetical. I don't have any plans to do this.
Right.
I've wondered about this though. If let's say before she was a Christian, she stepped out on her husband, had sex with somebody, they divorced, and now she found Jesus and she wants to remarry.
Well, it
Am
depends
I
how
an
long ago
adulterer
she
if I
found
marry?
Jesus.
Huh?
Depends how long ago she found Jesus, because there's a lot of women that find Jesus just to
But
do whatever, find a
just
man.
biblically, not good idea. Biblically, does that make me an adulterer if I marry her?
Well, no, if she actually cheated, technically that would be legitimate for marriage divorce, meaning she properly divorced him, even though it was a bad reason she got a divorce. She's the one that did the thing that was wrong. I mean, technically you could marry her, but like I said, you'd have to weigh like, why would you want to marry a woman who did this?
Well,
That's my point. Yeah.
I mean,
Technically
yeah.
it's not a sin, but I think it's a question of wisdom too.
Right. Well, I'm now talking about because there is a verse that says if a man marries a divorced woman, commits adultery. There's a verse that definitely says that, and that's what always
That's the
throws
one
me
we were
off.
talking about, but that's an improper divorce. Again,
Okay,
there's three
improper.
steps. There's three steps to a divorce: find uncleanness, give her writ of divorcement, send her away. So
Okay,
she technically did the uncleanness. She got the divorce, and she was sent away. So that's three steps made.
gotcha.
So she has a proper divorce, so she can be remarried. But like I said, would you want to marry her?
Right.
You know, like if she cheated 30 years ago and she's a different person, okay, or
Yeah.
20 or 10 or whatever. If
Yeah.
she just cheated yesterday and she found Jesus yesterday, I probably wouldn't marry her.
Right. No, I get that.
You see what I mean? Like there's a lot of people that find him, like they're in prison, they find him, and then they're just it's a get out of jail free card. You know
It's
what I mean?
amazing how many people find them. Like, I
That's my
shouldn't.
point. That's my point.
But women, a lot of women will find it after they go through their hoe phase and they realize that their
Right? They need
biological
a man. They would
their
need somebody to
biological
settle
clock's
down.
like ticking so loud, and they're like, "Oh, let me go to church and
That's what I'm
find
talking
Jesus."
about. That's what I'm talking about. The woman had just found him. Now she's a virgin again, which she's not.
Born again virgin.
Yeah, no, she's not anymore. I mean, she might become a better person. She might become a really good person even in a few years'
Yeah.
time. Who knows? But I
Right.
mean, like I said, you don't want to marry her right away. That's definitely not a good idea.
No. Sanctification's a
Yeah,
process. I agree.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so I think we covered a lot of stuff. I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Because I feel like you didn't get enough voice. He has 170,000 views. You know, that's
Yeah,
a
I
lot of views.
appreciate it. I would love to, have a discussion with him. What I don't want to debate him because a debate, he's going to come in to win. I'm going to come in to win. We're going to be trying to get these gotcha moments and zingers. And what I
Yeah,
really want to do is this is such an important topic of how much of my life this false doctrine stole from me because I should have a family. I should have kids right now in
yeah.
middle school or even high school, and it stole that from me believing this lie. And I want to have a public discussion with him in
So
search
you
of.
don't have any kids?
I don't. No, I've never been married. Well, I did
I
got
have
married.
four
I got
kids.
married in August. No, congratulations,
I
dude.
have two from for previous wife and two from this one.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wish I did, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a public discussion with him in search of the truth. Not trying to win the
I think
debate.
it would be cool if you guys had a debate or something, but I don't know if he'll go for it. Maybe
He,
on a
he's
platform.
if
Get
he
it on
really is who he says he
whatever,
is,
whatever podcast. That'd be pretty cool.
if
Get a
he's
lot
who
of
he
views on.
says he is, well, those guys want to win. They're
Well, no,
coming.
no, no. I think it's wise not to go in there with Andrew Wilson because he's a pretty good debater, but that's not the real reason why. I think he also is kind of, I mean, he goes overboard. He's
Yeah,
too he's sometimes kind of mean.
he's
And
aggressive. Yeah,
yeah, he's aggressive and he's a pretty good arguer, like I
yeah.
said, and that's not my forte. I'm not into that really. But and it's okay sometimes, to be a little bit not nice, but I think he goes a little crazy with
Well,
it.
that I don't think he would come. It's not going to be a fair. Like he's not coming to actually seek truth. He would be coming to win. Maybe get
Well,
some
he's trying
likes
to
and
win it. Yeah, he's always about winning the
yeah.
argument.
I don't. I
You know
want
he
to.
does it.
This is too important to just try and win. What we need to do is really look and try to find the truth and then tell people because this is a matter of life and death for people. This is a matter of.
I think it's bad for him to argue against it. I think Andrew Wilson should realize that if Tristan Tate and Andrew Tate had 10 wives instead of sleeping with thousands of women, it'd probably be better.
Of course, you would think so, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could at least say to him it's a lesser of two evils.
Right.
I mean, he should be at least able to
Yeah.
understand that.
But
I
with
mean,
Mike, I would love to have that discussion. I don't think he'll do it, but I'd love to have a just public discussion where we actually seek the truth together. Because if this is really from the enemy, that people need to know. It's time to expose this
well,
lie.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been studying this stuff for a long time. I think it came from originally the Vatican, and I think there's a lot. I've been covering this stuff for a long time. Around the end of the Middle Ages is when all this started.
Mhm.
Science separated from religion. That was one of the first things they did. And then, of course, they want to separate men from wives. So that's when the priests were forbidden to marry. And then this kind of led into the whole society. You see in the 1800s, Kellogg, cornflakes, that guy Kellogg. Uh, I think he had sex one time with his wife and he was turned off by it or something weird.
Wow.
That
Hmm.
guy, he made cornflakes to make people want to have less of it,
Huh.
sex. You didn't know
Really?
that? Yeah,
No.
go look into Kellogg's cornflakes. I study all the history of this stuff, and you can see the patterns that the devil's used because he
Oh,
separated science and religion to make them two different entities so that he could keep division and confusion and
right.
get people away from the church. Because right now, science has become a religion in some respects when it comes to like evolution and atheism. And you can see that also with the rainbow. It's sort of a religion as well.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
But they pretend like they're not a religion, and that's part of the trick. So they separate science and religion. They make religion look anti-science. So then you have these two things separated. So you have to choose either science or religion, and
Mhm.
that's one of the tools of the devil. And I think the devil also is in the church. So the
Mhm.
devil, and a lot of people think the devil's just outside the church, but I
Right.
think actually the worst form of the devil is in the church because look at Jesus. Who did he deal with? Did he deal with atheists? Did he deal with pagans? No,
Religious people.
religious leaders, because
Yeah.
the main thing that no one sees is the devil in the religion or in the
Yeah.
church.
Yep.
And that's the part they always forget and miss. That's why he said, beware the scribes and Pharisees,
Yeah.
because they'll mistranslate scripture. They'll do a
Yep.
lot of stuff.
Yep.
If you think it's just the devil's out here with the horns, you're going to miss the devil that's in the suit in the church up
Yep.
front.
When you were talking about Mike Winger and he gets invited to speak in all these places and he say takes the safe, comfortable, it reminded me of Jesus calling out the Pharisees. Oh, they love to pray in public and they get their tassels all long and they enjoy the praises of men.
Well, I'm not trying to condemn them, but yeah,
But
I
that
guess you
is
could make
kind
that.
of it's the
Yeah.
same thing basically, right? Like if you're not standing for truth because of that, then you're more like a Pharisee than you
I
are.
just realized something we should address that's important. You've heard about all these ministers getting caught in scandals recently, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve Lawson, one of John MacArthur's
Yeah.
henchman, secondhand man, top man. He was at
Dallas,
the
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
He fell.
Yep.
Appropriate relationship. Tony Evans just stepped down. He's also of the same ilk.
I did not hear that Tony Evans got
He
caught up
stepped
in that.
down, but no, he stepped down voluntarily, and he didn't even tell his family what he did. He didn't undisclosed sin.
Wow.
So he's still not told anybody what his sin was.
Yeah.
You have there's another henchman of John MacArthur. So there's like four guys that went to a Strange Fire conference like 10 years ago or whatever it was.
Mhm.
That was the anti-miracle conference they had called Strange Fire, which was like preaching against miracles. And two of the four have already been caught with women. And it says in scripture that uh, those having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. And it says they lead women astray and all this kind of stuff. And
Mm.
there's a verse also in the Shepherd of Hermas that talks about you'll be weak. If you don't believe in the power of God, you're going to be weak, and the
Mm.
devil will be able to tempt you very easily.
Mm.
So now
Mm.
you're seeing these ministers who don't believe in miracles falling, getting caught with women and stuff like that. And I think
Wow.
this also goes back to, them not sort of with this false message of like you can't think any thoughts about a woman, and having this sort of unreal
Yeah.
standard. You can't marry more
Yeah.
than just one woman, and then this led to them cheating and getting
Yep.
caught and all this stuff.
Yeah. And these are the most, godly men that we have. And I think there was like a dozen of them got caught in the last year having inappropriate affairs.
There
I
was
think,
8 in Texas alone,
yeah.
megachurch pastors that got caught.
So it's
That's
again,
this summer only.
we're setting men up for failure by prescribing lifelong monogamy when the Bible never does. And then we wonder why the men fail over and over again. So like Steve Lawson, what he should have did was he should have married the girl as a second wife, right? Not
Right.
that's just what the Bible says to do. I don't know if he had sex
But
with
the
her or not.
church would have not accepted it
It,
because of the mindset
because
of
of the
everything.
tradition, because of the tradition. Instead, he had to step down. The woman, what happens to her? The younger woman, nothing. She gets left by the wayside. He loses his church, blows up his ministry. The Bible was clear about what to do. Look, if he married her, take her on a second wife, he stays in the pulpit, no problem, not a sin.
Right.
But we've come up with all this other crap that's not in the Bible. Where so what is supposed to happen? People say, well, Exodus 22:16 isn't a good. That's what that was supposed to be a deterrent. Yeah, it was a deterrent. You got to pay the bride price, and now you got to take her home and take care of her. What's the better alternative? Go to counseling and apologize. That's what we do. I'm sorry, we issue a public apology and we send them off to therapy. I mean, that's
Well,
crap
you're talking about where it says if you're with a
for the
virgin, then you have
virgin.
to marry
Yeah,
her, right? But
yeah.
there's also another verse that's mistranslated that makes it sound like she was RAPE'd, right?
PE'd.
There's RAPED.
Oh, gotcha. I didn't know
Like
that.
there's a verse that says if a woman, I can't remember where I can look it up real quick, but it's interesting. You have these scribes mistranslating verses, and if they translated it correctly, you wouldn't have any of these problems.
Right.
And it's talking very similar to that verse where it makes it sound like she didn't have any, like he manipulated her, but it
Mm.
sounds like he forced her. But actually, if you look at the ancient languages, it says he manipulated her, like and the word is used to manipulate like instruments. Like you know
Huh.
how you manipulate an instrument to
Yeah.
make it play?
He seduced her.
He seduced her, and it says that he can never divorce her. You've ever heard that verse that says you can never divorce her?
Well,
I got
I think this is the real problem, Tony, is that the men are dropping the ball because look, we are leaving our daughters so unprotected. When a woman is young, a young girl, she's naive, she's foolish, and a woman should be under the authority of a man. And we need to take responsibility for these women. And, I was a nightclub promoter and I took advantage of the fact that, young women are not so smart and they will, be seduced easily.
Yeah,
and
it's right here.
the fathers aren't protecting them the way that we should. We
It's
need to
kind of like
step up
World
as
War
men.
II. You remember they would before they went off to World War II. I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna be left. So we have to do something right now before we get married.
Yeah,
That kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah, right.
It's like the same thing. Like if a man finds a damsel which is not betrothed and lay hold on her. So the word is actually manipulate, but it makes it sound like
Rape.
he literally
Yeah,
grabbed her, right?
yeah,
But if you actually look at the ancient language, the word lay hold is the same word used to manipulate. See right here,
wow,
manipulate. And so they mistranslated it, making it look like he forced it.
right,
And then and this is what atheists use to go against the Bible, is
right.
because they mistranslated it. They can't even translate it. So that makes you wonder why couldn't they translate that correctly?
Yeah,
It's just so simple, but for some reason you have all these weird mistranslations in scripture that atheists take advantage of.
yeah,
And like this is the stuff I've been covering for many years. But I mean, so I think we covered a lot. My whole point is that I think not like having these wrong ideas about things can lead you into error and can lead you into weakness.
yeah,
And we even had Ravi Zacharias getting caught,
yeah.
they were saying he was getting massages and getting extra things in the
Uh-huh.
process.
Yeah,
But I don't, I of course his wife and his son deny it, which I don't know. It's hard to say because he's
yeah,
dead.
yeah,
It came out after he was dead.
yeah,
And
yeah.
also, I've been kind of on the fence with him because there was a lot of money involved, and the
Mhm.
board very quickly threw this under the rug and got all the money. So it
Wow.
was a lot of money. So I'm thinking it could be also corruption in the company.
Right.
It could be he was innocent even because we can't speak, he can't deny it, he can't do anything, he's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that have been caught
Yeah.
recently. And I mean, you've seen, there's even that famous one that was Justin Bieber's minister,
Yeah.
Carl
Carl
Lentz.
Lentz. Yeah. Good godly men with the best intentions, and they can't do it. So it's an
Well,
I'm
I
not
don't
saying
think you know what, I don't know if I would call them all good godly men, but
well,
do think
I think they
I
have
do
good
think some
intent.
of them had good
Yeah.
intentions and
Yeah.
were
Some of
trying to
them
be
do.
godly
Yeah.
and just got off track.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think a lot of them, I really wonder if some of this is because God's exposing them because God wants better things going on in the future,
I
where He
just think
wants
this is
men that know the truth, that are practicing right, that are protecting themselves from this kind of situation.
men have a natural desire for variety. We do. And to say that we don't and try to make men ashamed of it, it doesn't work. It's never worked, right? It just turns into degeneracy when you try to tell them, oh, you shouldn't have that feeling. No, we do have a desire for variety. If you express it wrongly, then that's a problem. But
Yeah, yeah,
there is an ethical, healthy way, righteous way to express that variety, and you can marry more than one woman. The Bible regulates it, but God doesn't regulate sin. He regulates plural marriage. So, but we are not even showing men an ethical way. So what do? They do it unethically. They
right, right,
express
right.
the desire unethically because it's the only path that's there. And it's either don't do it, have the desire,
Well,
don't do it.
don't push against the system. Just
Right.
go with the system, do whatever's best in the system.
You,
The system's really, really bad at this point. So
yeah.
a lot of people don't want to push against this because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You and I talking against this, even though I'm not really wanting to be one myself,
Right.
I can understand how this would make society better. I think personally,
Right.
it would be a lot better than the rainbow and all this just going out and being with whoever you want at any minute
Yep.
and no consequences, no commitment, nothing.
Mhm.
I think this is a much better system, and that's
Yeah.
why it worked back in the old days.
I mean, this is if you look at the Old Testament, doesn't mean we have to do all those things, but it gives you a real good idea into what God thinks a society should run like. And this is how he said it should run. You sleep with a
Yeah.
virgin, you marry her.
And there
You
were
want
some
to take
cultures that were like I think Abraham, he was married to one woman, and then his wife's servant he ended up being with two, right? Because she couldn't get pregnant. But
right.
his society was more so the one woman thing, but it wasn't like it was a commandment like
Mhm.
today.
Right.
Today, it's like a commandment. Now, there were some societies, like you said, that actually had that were promoting it too. In
Mhm.
Israel, you saw it with, like you said, Moses had four, I think. And so you saw a lot of promotion in some cases as well.
Mhm.
But notice Abraham had, what was it? I don't know.
Hagar?
What's that?
Hagar?
No,
Who
no, I'm thinking Isaac. Which one had 12? I think it was Isaac, right? Or no,
Isaac
Jacob.
had 12 sons. Jacob had 12 sons, I mean.
Jacob had 12 sons. Yeah. So you see right there that clearly God wanted you to have more than one. And you can see also that the reason why Egypt was so scared is because they were multiplying so quickly.
Yes, they went from one man to 2.4 million in 500 years.
Right.
Think about that. And they overthrew the greatest nation in the
That's
world.
why the GOV and these at the top, these faceless people that are running things, don't like you having more than one wife or more. And even if you just had one,
Yes.
they don't want you to have 5 or 6 or 10 children. They don't want
Yep.
that
Nope.
because that's really bad. Because then that's competition for them.
You got
They
a
want their
militia.
money. They want to be in charge. They want less.
Yeah, and
Right?
you're
For you.
you're going to be a hard man to control. And if you got thousands of families like that, they can't push you around so easily.
So it's really interesting how the church is going along with what these faceless, top people say.
Yep.
I mean, even the church is like, I mean, at this point, a lot of people are not even talking against the rainbow. They're like, oh,
Mhm.
whatever. I
Right.
mean, it would be far better if it was polygynous and not rainbow, and they didn't talk against that because that'd be, I mean, even if they think it's wrong, at least it's not as bad, right?
Yeah, that's wild, man. Some woman was telling me she's in a plural marriage. She's the second wife, and she was going for bishop of the Lutheran Church. I think it was the Lutherans, but she said they have a trans bishop. But when they found out that she was in a plural marriage, they said that's the line. I was like, "Are you kidding me?
So the
These guys
Lutheran,
wrote the Bible that did this, and they're gonna let a transvestite."
so they let a trans be the bishop,
Yes, is
but
that
then
crazy?
if you're like a plural marriage, they kicked him out of the church.
Yes, they kicked her
That's
out of
the most
the
hilarious thing ever.
yeah,
So
it's so
it's
twisted.
hilarious. That's absolutely hilarious. And it reminds me of this guy. He was preaching on the street or something, and some guy came up to him. It was like a really, really Star Trek nerd. Like he could speak Klingon and stuff. He's just really, really nerdy. And he's like, "You're crazier than me." The minister, and it just reminded me of that. Like, the world thinks we're crazy for believing
Right.
in him, and then they're like into weird stuff. They're into way weirder stuff as
Oh
far.
my gosh, yeah. This is how God's going to sanctify his true church, though, right? Because we have to be living in this world that pushes against the truth, because if not, it would be just easy for us. We have to be, this is how he sanctifies us.
You
So,
could at least, I mean, if people watching think, it's still a sin, you could at least understand how it's not as bad
right.
as having promoting all this other stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think it's a sin because, like I said, if you look at the ancient languages, I think it's pretty clear. And I don't think in the Gospels it goes against it either. So,
I just challenge anybody out there to do the research for yourself. I wish I would have looked sooner,
well,
as I
it's
believe
hard.
it.
It's hard. It's hard to do your own research, and these translations don't make it easy in
Yeah.
English. And that's how the devil likes it. He likes everything to be hard to figure out the truth.
I got a great video on my channel with a guy named that goes by Berean Patriot, and we went over all the verses for and the ones that you've been told were against it, and he broke down every one in detail. He's also got his own website. His actually blog was the first article I read that opened my eyes. So it's out there if you really want to know the truth. I think people can find it fairly easy, but the people are lazy and they don't check and they just believe everything the nice man in the pulpit says, and it really
Well, it's a lot of work.
negatively
And
affects your life.
you're already working too many hours. A lot of people have to work jobs,
Yeah.
and you can see what inflation is. So they're nonstop working. They don't have time to research anything,
Yeah,
right?
but you know what? Under polygyny, it's a lot easier financially.
But you can see how this whole system's been set up this way. You got these faceless people. They don't want thinkers. They want workers. That was one of the quotes of one of these guys. Rocca Feller, I think he said that. They want you working nonstop,
Yep.
no money, broke, no children, trans, whatever. They want you that way. That's what they want.
Tate gets
And
that right too. The Matrix.
yeah, I guess you could say them. I mean, that's an easy way to
You're
say
a
it.
cog in the wheel. I mean, you're a cog. That's all you are
Right.
in the machine.
Keanu Reeves Matrix. I mean, we used to say that in the old days on YouTube as well. We used to say the
Yeah.
Matrix and blue pill,
Yeah.
red pill, all this kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, it was good talking to you.
Great talking to you, Tony. Thank you for the opportunity to chop it up.
All right, man. How do I turn off this
Down to the
recording?
bottom.
I'll just hit stop recording. All right.
Yeah. And then it'll start uploading to your computer. So just don't click it off.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, and just so I shouldn't say end afterwards. Just hit stop.